wait till the last minute and give it to Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan.
And make them eat it.
Yeah.
That's right. Kimberly, why can't the Democrats just let the tax cuts marinate and let Trump take a victory lap? Why do they have to go rain on his parade and do the shutdown? I mean, it's just so mean of them.
So mean, right? Mean-spirited in the time of Christmas giving. I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. No. It seems like they don't want to acknowledge that this was a victory. They're going to do what they can. It's sort of the politics involved here. It's political sport, back and forth, and so they're not going to let him have this. They don't want to. Why would they, right? Because they want to say that it's terrible, that this was something that's not good for the country, and so ultimately, though, Jesse, I would agree with you guys that I don't think that they're going to shut it down. Can you imagine? Let's just shut it down, over the holidays.
They got the state of Christmas Eve.
Right. I don't think so. So let's just count on that not happening.
I think they're trying to divert attention from the fact that they said all of the corporate tax cuts were going to go to all these fat cat CEOs, and instead, a bunch of companies, Juan, announced that they were going to give bonus checks to a lot of their employees. That's doesn't really have anything to do with what the Democrats were telling us was going to happen.
What are you talking about? That's exactly what the Democrats said. That what you
the Democrats said that they were going to give money back to the workers. That's exactly the opposite.
Excuse me. I'll finish the point,
okay.
And then you can start with the nonsense. But I'm just saying.
Well, that was true. That wasn't nonsense. That was true.
No, what you see, and you saw it today, is a ton of companies saying, oh, because of the tax cuts, which is going to enrich our shareholders and our executives, oh, yeah, here's a $1,000 bonus. To a lot of people, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, so that's fine.
Okay, all right.
It's a result of the fact that these companies made out like bandits in this tax deal. So that's the fact.
So you're against people getting $1,000 bonuses?
No, I'm all for it.
All right, so it's a good thing.
Don't be foolish.
So it's a good thing.
Don't be foolish and don't mistake what's going on here. What you have here is that the very rich got richer, and they say, here's a little bit for you. Why don't you take this sucker?
$1,000 is not a little bit.
Let me just tell you something. This bill is terrifically unpopular, remains unpopular, and if it comes to a shutdown right now, the Democrats have the upper hand. Why do I say that? Because the Democrats have public opinion on their side. You have Republicans who say, let's pump up military spending. Let's pump up the deficit. And yet they don't ever say, here's new sources of revenue in order to balance a budget. So who's irresponsible?
Well, I agree with that. Here? There's no talk about cutting spending. Let's throw to this soundbite. This is Sarah Huckabee Sanders talking about what's going to be on the agenda for 2018.
We're working through some of the top priorities. I think you can expect welfare reform, infrastructure, immigration reform, all to be top of mind and something that certainly we'll be looking at and talking about a lot over the first part of next year.
So what do you think about those ingredients?
Well, I think that all makes sense. Your first year as president is the year that you can get the most done legislatively before you head into the midterms. And so with the three big things that the president can claim in the tax bill yesterday, including the health care individual mandate repeal and ANWR drilling, which is amazing for a Republican to get through, then where do you go from there? So I think that they're going to have some messaging problems on welfare reform. If they can communicate it in a way that says we are wanting to reform the system so that we can get people out of a poverty trap, and this is the way that we want to do that, that would be it's a good message. It's hard to do when the other side of it would be you just gave corporations and wealthy people all this money, and now you want to take benefits away from the poorest among us. How dare you? I mean, that's a tough messaging thing.
That's lethal.
But I don't know how they do it. On infrastructure, look, the Democrats really want it, but here's a problem. The tax bill was supposed to be what gave you the new revenue in order to fund the big new infrastructure plan. But because it got all screwed up and they basically had to pay for that on the individual side instead of the corporate side, now where are they going to get the money? They're even floating the idea of a gas tax. And if you want to hit every American where it hurts, it's a gas tax. So I think that's problematic for them. I just used a banned word. The last one on immigration reform, I think that is actually the most plausible and probably out of those three the most important, and I think they could actually do that before March.
What do you think?
It's immigration, no doubt about it. They're already meeting right now in a bipartisan way on the Senate side on immigration reform, doing it massively. There's very little pushback, I understand, on chain immigration, and there's very little pushback on the lottery system.
Right.
So if you can give him border security, we'll give you DACA, and then maybe we're going to do something big. And for those Republicans who say, oh my goodness, amnesty, Donald Trump will go, listen, I don't care. Go ahead, hit me with it. I'll be the bad guy. guy. Paul Ryan, you could act frustrated. Mitch McConnell, throw up your hands. I'll take the slings and arrows. What you brought up is a very good point of not adding to the deficit. Welfare reform would be a bad message, even though it's necessary. All these entitlement reforms should be necessary. But to go, okay, now let's go into welfare for the poor people, even though you're reforming it to make it a better country, it would be not a good time. I think it would be insane to do that right now.
So, Kimberly, to Brian's point, DACA, amnesty, trade that off for the wall. Do you think that's effective for the president?
Well, look, you've got to be able to negotiate. You got to bring something to the table. You want them to go for this and to increase with, border security. They're not going to do it unless you give them something that's meaningful. That is the price of doing business, whether it's politics or whether it's just the financial industry, et cetera. So he understands that. I think that it's something he would be open to and reasonable about because of his heightened interest and desire to increase border security. Again, a really big banner item that he promised during the campaign. So he's going through his list. He's checking it twice. And he's going to find out which Democrats are naughty or nice. I just made that up.
I love it. I love it. Is there anything you like or think is nice about this agenda in 2018, Juan?
Yeah, immigration. I mean, I had a column in The Hill this week in which I said I think the immigration argument has shifted, especially after what we saw in Virginia, even Alabama, where those issues were front and center, and people were like, nah, that's not exactly going to push me over the line. The Republican candidates thought you could emulate Donald Trump's success with the issue. It's a little bit different now. But, I mean, to me, the thing here is I think that Paul Ryan really wants big entitlement reform, not just welfare reform. I'm talking about Social Security, Medicare, which are big slices of the federal budget.
Going to do it.
The president has said he won't do it, but guess what, Dana? I think that's what Ryan wants. I think that's what a lot of people in the Freedom Caucus want. They want to push that. And as you guys are saying, and I'm so pleased to hear you say it, it's insanity right now because most Americans see this as a giveaway to the rich, the tax deal. And if you come back with the budget and say, oh, yeah, we're going to pump up defense spending, and now we're going to smack down the elderly and the poor.
Well.
And don't forget, they've yet to renew DACA. Not DACA, but the CHIP, the Children Health Insurance Plan. And even Republicans are saying, this is a problem, and by January 1st, no child insurance plan.
And that is not something that Sarah Sanders talked about today. I know it is on their mind. But we have got to talk about the opiate crisis. I mean, today, again, for the second year in a row, we have the CDC, Center for Disease Control, telling us that Americans' life expectancy is going the wrong way for the first time. And they point to opiate addiction as being the thing that is increasing the deaths, and it's increasing the deaths of young people, in particular young men.
Yep.
But that is something we just have got to figure out. I don't know what the answer is, but
I'll build on your point because I was just at the border, and most of the Border Patrol says, yeah, we had a problem with illegals, but we most have a problem with fentanyl.
Right.
And that's what's coming across the southern border, so it might be a complete circle. I will say this, Juan, I think it's an oversimplification and inaccuracy to say this whole thing is a tax break for the rich. It really isn't. Most of the people with money are complaining they're not getting their break that they thought they're going to get. And when you look at corporations, I actually want to quote Mitt Romney, it is people. And there's entry-level jobs in those places, and there's an opportunity to bring people back. And the movie industry, of all things, is going to benefit maybe the most. So I'm curious.
Will they write any good movies, though?
Well, I'm not sure if we'll go where we're going to see it.
So let me get this straight. Did you just say that the rich are saying they're not getting enough?
They get 2%.
Oh,
37 to 35.
Oh, my God.
The rich are people, too, Juan.
Yeah, the rich.
Not
I'm just
you're
so
one of those
concerned about the
people.
rich. I just can't
It's true.
understand
1%er over here.
Ebenezer Scrooge, he's a human being. 80% of the benefit of this thing goes to the rich and the corporations, and you guys still want
Corporations are made up of people that are middle class.
That's
and
a
working.
family.
They're not?
This is ridiculous.
Yes.
They're not?
They are.
Corporations are all rich people?
If it created jobs for those people, Brian, that'd be great. But this is not that. This is about rewarding shareholders and the CEOs
If they act
who make
irresponsibly.
huge money right now.
If they act irresponsibly, that would be the answer. But if they act responsibly, they will spread it out, grow the company, because they're never going to get it again.
Oh, so you're saying to me, trust the very rich. The rich will take
But you're
care
a
of it.
corporation. Yeah,
Has a poor person ever given you a job, Juan?
Yeah, well, oh my God.
You give me
That was a Trump. But it's really
like
quick. What Brian's saying is a very important point. If you see corporates and you kind of demonize them, but the bottom line is that there are families, like individuals at all levels of corporations in support, working in staff, etc. So why do you want to begrudge them an opportunity to do something to provide for their families?
Wait a
understand
wait a second. Do you
Some
think
kind of improvement and relief is better than none at all.
$1,000 means a lot.
But do you think that corporate profits in this country are at record levels? Yes, they are. How about the stock market? Record levels.
What's wrong with that, with a growing and prosperous economy?
Oh, give the rich more.
No, the argument is continue to improve on a situation that has been very fortuitous. Why not do it? And why not spread it around to the middle class, too, and to the lower class to be able to give them a chance?
The forgotten
Spread it
working
around,
man.
like Obama said. Remember? Spread it around.
Yes.
A new low for the left. Up next.
Fox News Channel is bringing you an all-American New Year's celebration from New York City and around the country. Catch the biggest live performances and join the conversation using hashtag Fox News 2018. Kick back and watch the ball drop with your hosts Kennedy and Jesse Waters live from the heart of Times Square. Our must-see coverage begins New Year's Eve at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fox News Channel.
It's no secret a lot of folks on my side of the aisle are not happy with the new GOP tax bill. But didn't an attack on African-American Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina over his support of that bill go beyond the pale? The Republican was assailed by blogger Andy Ostrow on Twitter for appearing next to President Trump at the celebration of the passage of the bill. Ostrow wrote, quote, "What a shocker. There's one black person there, and sure enough, they have him standing right next to the mic like a manipulated prop," end quote. Now, Scott responded. He said, quote, "Probably because I helped write the bill for the past year, have multiple provisions included, got multiple senators on board over the last week, and have worked on tax reform my entire time in Congress. But if you'd rather just see my skin color, please feel free," end quote. Now, Ostrow has since apologized. He wrote a subsequent piece talking about the lack of diversity, both in the Republican Party and in the Trump administration. But the initial shot, he had to delete the tweet. He's apologized. It did not go over well. So let me ask you, Jesse, what would you say to Mr. Ostrow?
Oh, boy.
Well, first, when the white guy plays the race card against the black guy, it usually doesn't go too well.
You're telling me.
I know. Sorry, Juan. And I know a thing or two about gaffes. Now, when you create a gaffe, you don't double down and then write an essay about it, making the gaffe worse. And that's what he did. He came out and said...
Where did you learn that, Jesse?
I don't know, through experience. So he says the Republican Party has a diversity problem. Well, there's just as many minorities in the Senate that are Democrats as there are that are Republicans. I don't know if you count Elizabeth Warren. I don't know how she's self-identifying right now, but that's the truth. It's basically on par. So
wait a second. I think the numbers are in Congress right now.
No, I'm talking about Congress. I'm talking about the Senate.
Well, there's
basically
one black senator. But
no, well, there's Rubio.
There's Booker and Scott are the black senators.
And Kamala Harris. But there's Rubio, there's Cruz, and there's Tim Scott.
Okay, but I'm saying if you look at the overall Congress, 37% of Democrats in Congress are not white, while only 5% of Republicans.
Listen, I don't think the Republican Party is adverse to having more black representation. But the problem is, and I don't know if it's a problem, but it's a challenge, there aren't a lot of black Republicans running to get the nomination, and wonder why. If you are a black Republican in this country, a prominent one, you're going to get savaged by the media. You're going to be called horrific things by Democrats, racial slurs. And even Democrats and blacks are going to say horrible things like you're a sellout. So it's no surprise.
You'll even be left out of the African American Museum if you were a Supreme Court justice.
That's a shocking fact. I mean, to me, I just can't believe they not only Thomas and Scott, but you look at someone like Ben Carson. You go back and Condoleezza Rice. I mean, why is Condoleezza Rice there? And they had all kinds of thought. And, just wait a minute. This woman has a Ph.D. She's an expert in terms of Russian affairs. What about her credentials?
Compared to what African Americans have been through in this country, this is nothing. To take a few slings and arrows in 2017 as opposed to back of the bus in 1960 and 50 and 40, and so you can't play with white players up until Jackie Robinson, this is nothing. It's Republican. I think the Republicans are so off on this. They make no effort to recruit not candidates, voters. Right. They make no effort in the inner city. They throw up their hands. It makes no sense because what they say they stand for should resonate if presented correctly. And if you get repelled immediately, go back at it.
Well,
My goodness, it's an embarrassment when you go to these different events.
Let me give you support. The support is this. I think it's 7% of African Americans identify as Republicans per se. But if you ask, are you conservative, then it's up to a third. Now imagine a third of black people say they are conservatives, and yet, Brian, to your point, I don't see the outreach from the Republican Party, and especially not from this president.
So I did this event yesterday that Jesse won at night. I went in the morning, and an African-American put up his hand. There weren't many. It was a conservative group. I was talking about the book, and he said to me, when the questions came up, he wasn't talking about history. He said, I'm upset as an African-American of even affirmative action. I don't want the scales tipped. I don't want, if I can't, my grades aren't high enough, I don't want to get into that school. Right. And I said, wow, I can't say that. But I wonder if more people felt that way. If you're an African-American 12 or 17 or 18-year-old and they say a 96 is good for you and a 99 is for a white person, you might say, congratulations, look, Mom, I got in. On the other hand, look what they had to do to get me in. And that bothered him. And I'm wondering how many other people out there feel the same way.
Oh, well, I can tell you that, I mean, people I know very well. Justice Thomas, for example, huge proponent of just your point. Now, the contrary point would be that affirmative action is not about unqualified people. If you get a 96 on the test and somebody gets a 98, you're both qualified. The issue is whether people were previously excluded, kept out who were qualified, and are we now opening doors? You see this with women as well. So let me just go to you, Kimberly, and say, with Donald Trump, he gets 8% of the black vote. Yesterday, in what was quite a self-congratulatory display, you have all these people standing there on the steps. What part of the White House is that there?
South Lawn.
On the South Lawn. No, the stairwell.
Well, the portico?
The portico stairwell. And so there's Tim Scott.
Not an architect.
And I thought the most difficult part of this was Mr. Ostrow refers to him as a prop. I found that rather insulting.
Of course. How could anybody not find it? Would anyone like to be called a prop? White, black, Latino, Asian, male, female. It is so dismissive and so derogatory and unacceptable. So, I mean, there's some things you can say sorry, but sorry isn't good enough. And Tim Scott is an outstanding public servant and a smart man. He worked very hard on this. He should be given the credit because of merit and because of the effort that he put in to try to help the American people. He deserved his spot there, and I'm glad that he was there, and he worked with the president cooperatively and other members of Congress to be able to make this happen. So we owe him a debt of gratitude and thanks and appreciation for his skill set and his focus on this.
I thought he did a great job. And you know what? The best job was his defense, because it made sense. Susan Rice taking on President Trump again. This time, the former national security advisor to President Obama insisting that Donald Trump's America First policy will only make our country less safe. Something's cooking in the Five Kitchen. A debate coming up next.
All of these nations that take our money and then they vote against us at the Security Council, or they vote against us potentially at the Assembly. They take hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars, and then they vote against us. Well, we're watching those votes. Let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care. People are tired of the United States. The people that live here are great citizens that love this country. They're tired of this country being taken advantage of, and we're not going to be taken advantage of any longer.
President Trump's critics are fired up again after he threatened to end aid to countries that condemned his decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The results of that controversial vote at the UN today in a moment. But first, Susan Rice has a lot to say about Mr. Trump's newly unveiled America First national security strategy. President Obama's former national security advisor wrote a scathing new op-ed. Here's a tidbit. Relinquishing the nation's moral authority in these difficult times will only embolden rivals and weaken ourselves. It will make a mockery of the very idea of America First. From what I recall, the Obama administration's strategy to keep America out of danger didn't exactly turn out so well. So, Jesse, what do you make of a strong statement, strong wording?
Yeah, not rescuing our ambassador in Benghazi was not really putting America first. I would say that to Susan Rice.
Or the rest of the Americans that were there that
exactly.
lost their lives.
leading from behind, not really putting America first. Let's just look what happened under Obama and Susan Rice and her friends. Iranians got richer. North Korea nuked up. ISIS took over Iraq. Russia took over half of Ukraine. Syrian dictator gassed its own people, and China was left unchecked. Donald Trump comes in, and he corrects every single one of these things. Iran deal in the crosshairs, sanctions slapped on North Korea, ISIS destroyed in Iraq. U.S. is now selling lethal weapons to our allies in Ukraine. Assad got 50 Tomahawk missiles to the face, and we're finally cracking down on China. It seems like America first to me, and when she's talking about, we're not pushing American values, we've relinquished our moral authority. Susan Rice and friends sat back and did nothing while student Democrats tried to overthrow the Iranian regime. They also sat back and watched Assad gas his own people, rewarded Cuba, a horrible human rights abuser, with a New Deal, and I think they treated our best and closest ally in the Middle East, Israel, like a piece of garbage. So I'm not going to sit here and listen to lectures from Susan Rice. She's got no credibility. She ruined it on those Sunday shows. She ruined it when she said that Bergdahl was some great hero who, escaped on the battlefield.
Honor and distinction.
Served with honor and distinction. Thank you. Enough from Susan Rice.
You've had it.
I've had it.
Okay, so Dana, what do you make of the statement?
Well, I think she's responding to the president's recently released national security strategy. It wasn't just about the Jerusalem decision.
More comprehensive.
But I would say one way to respond would be 500,000 deceased Syrians could not be reached for comment. And I really think that having not been there and giving a date certain, pulling out of Iraq too early, all of those things, there was a cascading effect. Every administration can look back and forth. Like there has to be a decision. I actually think on America first, it just depends on how you define it. Every president, their most important oath that they take is to defend the United States of America. So everyone is trying to put America first. Some people have different ways of doing that. Like they would want to do a multilateral agreement on trade, like the TPP that President Trump took us out of. Or the Paris Accords made a lot of sense to them. It doesn't to President Trump. That doesn't mean that they weren't actually thinking that America should be first. But I do also think that this parade of horribles that they anticipated because of President Trump has not materialized. And so the protestations that they write in newspapers and sometimes say on the background or they put out on Twitter leave people a little flat.
Okay, Brian, so how did you see it?
Well, I mean, you guys covered a lot of it. I would say this. Susan Rice, not great timing, being that the fact that the Politico story that talks about looking the other way on Hezbollah seems to have a lot of legs and a lot of substance to it that's going to cause an investigation, I believe, in the House, which I cannot wait to get to the bottom of because I have a sense it's not going to be political but informational, because that backs up the latest installment of their foreign policy, which is anything but successful. I think people looked at the poise and the character of President Obama, and they loved the way he handled himself. They loved the way he looked on the world stage. They loved the big crowds that he got. And I think they're substituting that for an effective foreign policy. Even though he's a great family and is an historic figure, his foreign policy seems to be one misstep after another and a sacrifice for an Iranian deal that is anything but strong and solid. So, just to be honest, Susan Rice, I was not going to read. The one thing I knew for sure this morning, because you read a lot, I go, oh, good, I don't have to read that.
I skipped it, too.
And it was the 5 that brought me into Susan Rice, because I knew that I couldn't get anything out of this that's going to help me today, but I forgot about the 5. Not saying it's a bad decision, but it's something. But it's a decision I just said to myself, this is not going to help my life at all.
Yeah,
I knew. I mean, really.
A lot of conservatives are like that. They just eliminate things that somehow rebut their worldview. But let me just give you something. Susan Rice is on target here, because if you looked at the security policy as enunciated by President Trump, it really moves away from America occupying a leading role in the world, given that we are the world's leading superpower militarily and the leading economic power. So when it comes to, for example, spreading democracy, I don't see that. What about human rights? He doesn't speak about it. What about? I
just don't know where you want him to do it.
I can tell you where I want him to do it. Take something like TPP,
for example.
Yeah, or take something like TPP. All of a sudden, he's pulling away from Asia, allowing China to become the dominant player economically, to dictate human rights standards. That's crazy to me.
Where is China dictating human rights standards?
And all through Asia now.
So what are they doing?
So I'm telling you, they are
in 1 year they're dictating human rights standards?
No,
where?
Wait, hold on. What I'm telling you is right now they have organize all the Asian countries like Indonesia and Australia, are now going into a deal with China as the lead economic player instead of the United States. That's a result of his nationalistic approach to foreign affairs, and it's not good. And by the way, you guys want to go back to what happened with Hezbollah, which is a bogus story.
You really think so?
That's totally bogus. Why don't you go back to Niger and ask what happened to our soldiers? What happened there? We still don't know. But my point to you is you have got to see the world not just as people who are hostile
I've seen their
or
world.
taking.
I've lived in their world for 8 years. I don't need a recap.
You lived in the what?
I lived in her foreign policy for 8 years.
And
I don't need
covered
a recap. I don't need a lecture.
You're a student of it.
Well, let me tell you, it was pretty successful, wasn't it?
In what way?
World got a lot more dangerous.
I think the world.
A lot less accountability.
South Korea have never been more in tune militarily.
Oh,
with the US.
let me see. Was Israel threatened then? No.
Right.
I think we took away nukes, right, from the Irans.
Brian, bad news for you. You just cut into your next block.
No, that's so unplayed yourself.
Yeah, exactly. The Hollywood hate fest for President Trump goes on. Tom Hanks, the latest celeb, to spout off next.
I don't think so.
All right, I've never heard that song before, but I'll go with it. Steven Spielberg's new movie, The Post, hits theaters tomorrow. I have a feeling it's not on President Trump's things to watch list over Christmas. It's about a battle between the press and the government in decades past. Written by Juan Williams. Thank you for that input, Juan. Tom Hanks stars in it as the Washington Post editor, Ben Bradley. He was just asked, by the way, was Tom Hanks, if the president wanted him to screen it at the White House, would he go to the White House? His reply, I don't think I would. In fact, I would not have been able to imagine that we would be living in a country where neo-Nazis are doing torchlight parades in Charlottesville and jokes about Pocahontas are being made in front of the Navajo code talkers. This is the moment where, in some ways, our personal choices are going to have to reflect our opinions. I would probably vote not to go. We should note the president hasn't asked to screen the movie, nor has he asked for Tom Hanks to come over. But it's a preemptive no from Tom Hanks. What do you think the reaction should have been, Juan? Are you surprised by the man who starred in so many great movies having this reaction?
No, I think lots of people do. But, you know, the question is, are you honored if the president of the United States, I don't care who he is, invites you over to the White House?
Yeah.
Now, for example, I know this season lots of people on the Democratic side just opted not to go anywhere near Trump in the Christmas parties and the like. So I don't think this is a unique response. The question is that, you know, at some point you just want to, I don't know, some people might say bite your tongue. But I think that Tom Hanks was asked a question and he answered honestly.
Dana, do you think it's a big
teeth
deal?
Marks in my tongue from all the years.
Right.
No, I think that you would say, well, if he calls, we'll talk about it. It's not hard to say, but
he could have got out of it very easily. He wanted to make that statement. It's the
same thing that we talked about with the athletes. Was there Lindsey Vonn that was asked about President Trump and the Olympics and would she go to the Olympics if she gets a gold medal? I mean, all of those things. The press is going to want to do that because it will help the press.
Yes.
It's not going to help them. So I would always take a pass on it.
You know what's incredible, Kimberly, is that he knows history. This guy has really gotten into helping out the veterans. He makes some great movies. If he's not acting in them, he's producing them. You would think he'd get the sense, what Juan brought up to, the sense of history of the White House and the president asking you to come to screen your movie, that would overwhelm any thought, I don't agree with him on these policies. I mean, it's not like there was one incident in Virginia. It's not like every day the president is saying, go do this and go do that when it comes to Charlottesville.
No, you're absolutely right. But, you know, he can stand on principle. This is what he thinks and what he believes. I mean, wouldn't be my choice, right? So, but you have a lot of people in Hollywood taking stands like this and having personal opinions and using their celebrity to be able to make statements against the president or against his policies, against his statements or, you know, viewpoints. That's First Amendment. Again, it's not something that I like to hear or experience. But
would you ever give up your full season of Bosom Buddies on DVD because of this?
I don't like that show.
It was where he broke out.
I like
really
that
came
show.
To his own. It was very good. It was about two friends trying to make it in this world.
No, I know the show.
Jesse,
I know the show, but
Jesse, here's
one of my favorites.
It's funny you bring that up because I do have a question for you. There was a screening 48 hours ago of Churchill, and the president invited Democrats and Republicans over right when the tax plan was actually signed, and they brought them together. They actually evidently had a great time. Isn't that indicative of these two parties not getting along? We can come together around one movie.
I don't think coming around a movie about Watergate is the right movie choice for this president. I don't think President Trump's going to screen a Watergate movie at the White House. Maybe Bad Vibes. I don't know. That's my guess.
Bad idea.
Bad idea. And I think anytime one celebrity trashes Trump, 2 Americans in the heartland vote for him.
Right.
So this doesn't have any effect on anything.
It's like every time, some people say that every time you hear a bell, an angel gets his wings. That's you say.
Similar analogy.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that in 2001, when President Bush takes over, one of the first things he did was to invite Senator Ted Kennedy and his wife to come and watch a movie, and I think it was actually about JFK, I believe.
Right.
And that was where they started to work out and ultimately got the 2 things that President Bush claimed as his big accomplishments that first year: tax cuts and the No Child Left Behind.
Yep.
And by the way, this movie is about the Pentagon Papers, not Watergate.
Right.
Similar.
Right. Ben Bradley did do Watergate.
That's silly. God.
You knew what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Similar era.
Exactly.
Boy, you're going to get a mom
we
text.
we have to get a subscription to Movie Phone, and this whole thing would have been ironed out. 60 minutes before the top of the hour. Is anyone else feeling stressed out with Christmas just 4 days away? Fear not.
Yes.
Help is on the way, according to reports. The best thing you can do, relax and unwind during this busy holiday time. We have the one thing that could change your life in just a moment.
All the windows, candles burning bright, stockings on.
It's Christmas in 4 days. It's supposed to be a holly and jolly time, but for many folks out there, it's a stressful and anxiety-provoking one. So how do we unplug from it all, unwind, and enjoy the holiday? We literally unplug, according to one psychologist. You go on a digital detox, you put down the devices, stay away from anything that has a screen, and let your brain and body power down. I actually read about somebody, it was what magazine was it? I read it this past weekend where they took like
National
an
Review?
no, it was like one of those though. They took like a 3-month break. It was the New Yorker. Not at all
wow.
like National Review.
Even worse.
But they took a 3-month break and they said it was like really healthy.
I hear that's
Did you do that?
That's a new trend. I'd love to do it. If it wasn't work related, I would go back to the flip phone because I really
jitterbug?
believe, I don't remember the last time a text or email helped me. It seems like every time every time I look down, I'm like, there's 9 things I have to do, and I'm wondering to myself, was I just not doing these things before the text message?
Like, what did you
and
think
email
about?
era? Yeah, what did I think about?
I miss time away from it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I did a digital detox today, and that's why I didn't know what that movie was about. I got started early.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You detox all the way back to Watergate and Pentagon Papers.
My whole life has been a detox. No, I like detoxing. I think it's good, but if you're in the news business and then you come back from vacation and they ask you to talk about something and you have to say, well, what happened over the break? So it's hard for us. But I recommend it for other people.
So here's the thing. I remember going to the doctor a couple years back, and he said, you need to just, like, chill out, dude. You need to calm down.
Really?
So here
you
was
paid him for that?
What? Oh,
chill out, dude.
No kidding.
He probably also
could have told you that.
drink more water.
So here were his
Every doctor
suggestions.
says drink more
His
water.
#1 suggestion was, don't wear a watch. And I love watches.
I don't wear a watch.
But don't wear
Really?
a watch. And he said because even as you were waiting in the waiting room, you kept flipping, like looking at your watch. He says that just drives up your pulse. Don't do that. He also suggested I get away from ketchup, use more mustard and stuff like that. But one of the
Did he say, no, don't sit next to me?
Why
that
ketchup?
definitely drives up the pulse.
Why ketchup? Too much sugar.
Sugar and salt, not good for you. But I think this idea is excellent because the way I lead my life, by the way, is, and I know it frustrates a lot of people I work
mysterious
with,
way,
is
yeah.
I don't keep my eye on email and text messages.
You don't say. Juan.
People.
Wait, is that why you're
comments
always late? Because you never
on
look
that-
at the clock?
No, that's true. I don't look at clocks.
Because we're always,
basically.
where's the wand?
Yeah, well, that's my mother used to say that. But I just basically look. If you really need me, you'll call me. And you know what? I check the email every once in a while. It's not like I'm out of touch. But
People
boy,
do say that.
around
They're
here,
like, yeah, he
people
doesn't check
are
email.
absorbed by
Well, but
that.
the other thing is, Kimberly, I
Yes,
think a
babe.
lot of people, especially, I'm going to say men,